apparently.
Today I'll be refuting the claim that gays and lesbians must be allowed to serve their country openly because of the following claims. 1, that there is evidence in declining military numbers. 2, the current military policies are a form of segregation. And 3, an equal system is essential in national security. For those of you who aren't clear with the definition of open in military terms, it is when a homosexual serves openly in the military. And that means that he or she has notified the members or officials in their surroundings of his or her sexual orientation. I'd first like to point out that this speech is a claim of policy and not a claim of fact, because the advocate proposes that this policy must be changed. So today I'll be refuting with my claim that homosexuals serving openly in the military will negatively affect the country's unit of defense by first being an external factor in active enrollment in the military, also by weakening cohesion, and lastly by interfering with equal representation in the national defense system. The first claim that I will be refuting is that allowing homosexuals to serve openly in the military will stop the decline in military numbers. The advocate uses the Department of Defense's statistics to show a decrease in active enrollment. He then interprets these statistics as a reflection of the number of homosexuals who are afraid or refuse to serve in the military if they are not allowed to serve openly. However, the advocate fails to acknowledge other explanations for the fall in active enrollment. An important external factor is that concerns and fears of the members or those who are interested in enrolling in the military remain consistent among people regardless of sexual orientation. Which brings me to my claim that allowing homosexuals to serve openly in the military won't have much effect on the decline of active enrollment. Some other explanations are outlined in a study conducted by the Youth Attitude Tracking Study, YAT, an annual Defense Department survey of civilian youth that estimates the enlistment propensity. An external factor that is mentioned in the survey is that the credibility of military advertising. According to the survey, both parents and youth did not trust military recruiters, and they believed that the advertised messages are inaccurate and inflated. Another external factor that concerned civilians was the danger associated with joining the military. Many citizens are reluctant to enlist because of the perceived hazards of the military service, such as casualties in hostile conflicts, the possibility of accidents with munitions, or exposure to dangerous chemicals, radiation, and disease. Another explanation for the declining military numbers is the 24-month maximum call-up limit. The New York Times article, Part-Time Forces on Active Duty Decline, deeply provides more information on the details of the 24-month maximum and how it has affected the military. It is stated that at a time of national emergency that up to 1 million members of the Ready Reserve have been called to active duty, which has contributed to the declining military numbers to be an enduring problem. Consequently, as the soldiers approach the 24-month maximum, the military loses numbers. The second claim that I am refuting is that barring homosexuals from serving in the military is a form of segregation. By definition, segregation means separating people or different races, classes, or ethnic groups, as in public or commercial facilities, as a form of discrimination. As a result, the claim that current policies are a form of segregation is irrelevant. The advocate then goes on to correlate segregation to the lack of cohesion. My research yields opposite results. That proves allowing homosexuals to serve openly in the military will actually negatively affect cohesion. The reason for this is the overall feelings of the platoon members. According to the CRS issue brief by Foreign Affairs and National Defense, the Division and Charles Dale American Law Division, states that the primary reason that the military upheld its ban against gay service members was that it is unnecessary for the military to provide cohesiveness. It states that the realities of military life include working closely while on duty, but the true intimacies are to be traced to the barracks, the orderly room. The mess hall. Life in the barracks meant sleeping, eating, and sharing facilities with fellow platoon members. And having homosexuals be a part of that structure violates the privacy of each member. Because members of militaries are more conservatively minded people and are opposed to having homosexuals among their ranks, forcing these individuals to serve with them undermines the morale of the military. The last claim that I'm refuting is that prohibiting homosexuals from serving openly in the military denies them of equal representation. In the end, homosexuals are still allowed to serve in the military. It's just that they're not allowed to conduct in homosexual activity. So they still get represented equally. In conclusion, homosexuals serving openly in the military will negatively affect the country's unit of defense. So think about it. Is making a minuscule change in the policy allowing homosexuals to reveal their sexual orientation and still serve in the military really worth all the negative consequences that follow?
All right, the main claim and the secondary claims are labeled pretty clearly. The definition of open becomes important only at the very end in that last argument that you've got, so I don't know why you're dealing with that definition early on. Save it until you're making the argument. Your signpost on the first point is basically, well, actually, before you get to the first point, you also mentioned that it's a claim of policy. One of the reasons that you want to explain why a claim of policy is important is that certain other considerations become relevant for a claim of policy that wouldn't be relevant for a claim of fact. The question about whether or not something is true is one thing. The question about what taking an action would lead to, whether or not that's a good or bad thing, and value issues become relevant to policy claims when they're not relevant to claims of fact, and therefore that would allow you to introduce some other additional issues. On the military numbers, you give a good explanation about counter-causality. You've got a whole lot of evidence there explaining why people might not engage or enlist in the military for a variety of reasons. I didn't hear much analysis of what the advocate's argument was that suggested that people are not going into the military because of this closed policy that's going on. So all I got is your contrasting policy on that. It seems like it's a good argument, but again, I don't get much ability to make a contrast on that argument. On the segregation issue, you've got a little bit of a definitional issue here. Here's where you're introducing an issue that otherwise might not be relevant, the question of cohesiveness. Now, if the advocate made a claim that said prohibiting homosexuals from serving in the military undermines cohesiveness, then this is a directly contradictory claim and you could introduce it. But if it's just, this is an argument that's based on what would the consequence be of allowing homosexuals to serve openly in the military, that's why you need to have that policy argument earlier, so that would be relevant. And you kind of explain what the issue is. And then you get to the key point, which is the thing that you were talking about at the beginning, and that is if we're ever going to be talking about issues of fairness or legitimacy here, no homosexuals are prohibited from serving in the military. They're allowed to serve in the military. What they're not allowed to do is to be openly active about their sexual activities while serving in the military. And then I think you might want to, in order to even minimize you try and minimize the question of, should we really worry about this small technical thing in comparison to the contrast here? Well, you can make that small technical thing even more minuscule by pointing out that nobody in the military is allowed to engage in open sexual behaviors, and you can't hit on your platoon mates. No matter what sex they are, you're not supposed to be, openly talking about those kinds of issues in the professional ranks. That's not something that's allowed. And so the the distinction here is, next to nothing as a way of kind of reducing that point, and I think that that would make your argument stronger.